The scratching began at exactly 3:13 a.m. Every night, something moved above Emily's bedroom ceiling. At first, she blamed rats. Then she blamed the old house. But on the seventh night, she heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, walking across the attic floor directly above her bed. Emily lived alone in the century-old farmhouse she had inherited from her grandmother. The attic had remained locked for years, and nobody remembered where the key was. Yet every night, the sounds grew louder. One stormy evening, while rain hammered against the windows, Emily heard a child's voice whisper from above. "Help me!" The voice was faint but unmistakable. Emily froze. Her blood ran cold. She grabbed a flashlight and slowly climbed the creaking stairs leading to the attic door. The whisper came again, followed by a loud thud that shook the entire hallway. Emily's hand trembled as she touched the dusty doorknob. The door was ice cold. Suddenly, she noticed fresh scratch marks on the wood. They hadn't been there before. Something was trying to get out. Then the whisper changed. "He killed me!" A violent bang erupted from the other side of the door. Emily stumbled backward in terror. Before she could react, the hallway lights exploded, plunging the house into darkness. For several terrifying seconds, the only sound was her rapid breathing. Then she heard someone laughing inside the attic. Emily barely slept that night. The voice echoed through her mind. The next morning, she searched through old family documents stored in the basement. Hidden inside a dusty wooden chest, she found newspaper clippings dating back nearly 40 years. One headline immediately caught her attention. "Local boy missing. Search ends without answers." The article described a 10-year-old boy named Daniel Harper, who vanished without a trace after visiting the farmhouse. Despite extensive searches, authorities never found his body. Emily's hand shook as she studied the faded photograph. The boy looked terrified even in the picture. On the back of the newspaper clipping, someone had written 3 chilling words in red ink. "Still up there." As she continued searching, Emily found an old diary belonging to her grandmother. Most pages were damaged, but one entry remained readable. "I heard Daniel screaming from the attic. God forgive us for what we allowed to happen." Emily felt sick. Allowed? That meant someone knew exactly what happened. As thunder rumbled outside, a loud crash echoed from upstairs. The sound came from the attic. When Emily rushed into the hallway, she froze. The attic door was now standing open. The attic door had never been opened. Yet now it stood wide open, slowly creaking back and forth as if inviting Emily inside. The darkness beyond the doorway seemed unnatural, swallowing the weak beam of her flashlight. Every instinct told her to run, but the image of Daniel Harper's frightened face haunted her thoughts. If the boy's spirit was truly trapped inside the attic, she needed answers. Emily climbed the narrow staircase. Each step groaned beneath her weight. The air grew colder with every foot she ascended. A foul smell filled the darkness, old wood mold, and something far worse. At the top, she discovered a room frozen in time. Dust-covered furniture sat untouched for decades. Torn curtains hung from broken windows. Children's toys lay scattered across the floor, as though someone had abandoned them in a hurry. Then her flashlight landed on a small wooden rocking horse. The horse suddenly began rocking by itself. Emily stepped backward. The rocking horse moved faster, then faster. Suddenly it stopped. Complete silence filled the attic. A child's voice whispered directly behind her ear. "Look under the floor." Emily spun around. Nobody was there. But near the center of the attic, one floorboard was slightly raised. Fresh scratch marks surrounded it. Something had desperately tried to escape from beneath. Heart pounding, Emily knelt beside the damaged floorboard. Using an old crowbar she found nearby, she carefully pried the wood loose. Dust exploded into the air. Below the floor was a small hidden compartment. Inside rested a rusted metal box. Its lock had long since broken away. Emily slowly opened the lid. Inside, she discovered dozens of yellowed photographs, newspaper clippings, and a small leather journal. The photographs showed Daniel Harper standing beside several adults outside the farmhouse. One face immediately caught her attention. It was her grandfather. Emily quickly opened the journal. The entries belonged to Daniel. The final pages were written in shaky handwriting. Mr. Walker said he would show me something special in the attic. I want to go home. He locked the door. Someone help me. The last page contained only one sentence written repeatedly across the paper. They left me here. Emily felt tears form in her eyes. Daniel hadn't disappeared. He had been imprisoned. Then a violent gust of freezing wind swept through the attic. The journal pages flipped wildly until they stopped on a blank sheet. Slowly, fresh words began appearing on the paper, as if written by an invisible hand. Make them pay. The words, make them pay, were still appearing on the page when every window in the attic suddenly slammed shut at the same time. The deafening crash echoed through the house, and for a terrifying moment, Emily thought the entire attic might collapse around her. The temperature dropped so rapidly that her breath became visible in the air. The journal trembled in her hands, as if something unseen was trying to take it back. Fear urged her to run, but curiosity held her in place. She stared at the final message, trying to understand what Daniel's spirit wanted. Then the journal's pages began turning by themselves, faster and faster, until they stopped on a page containing several names. Emily recognized one immediately, her grandfather, Thomas Walker. The others were local men who had lived in the town decades ago. Before she could study the list further, a new line slowly appeared beneath the names. They lied. They took everything. They left me to die. Emily's heart pounded as she realized Daniel had not merely been trapped in the attic. Something far darker had happened. The ghost was not asking for justice anymore. It wanted revenge, and after 40 years of silence, it was finally strong enough to claim it. As Emily carefully copied the names into her notebook, strange noises echoed throughout the farmhouse. Heavy footsteps moved across the ceiling despite nobody being there. The walls groaned as though the house itself was waking from a long nightmare. Suddenly, Emily's phone rang. The caller ID displayed the name of Sheriff Harris, one of the few people helping her investigate Daniel's disappearance. When she answered, his voice sounded shaken. He told her that one of the men listed in the journal, an elderly former businessman named Richard Cole, had been found dead only minutes earlier. Witnesses claimed the power in his house failed before neighbors heard terrified screams. When authorities entered the home, they discovered a message scratched into the bedroom wall. I remember. Emily nearly dropped the phone. The timing was impossible. She had only just discovered the names. Yet somehow Daniel's spirit already knew she had uncovered the truth. Outside, dark storm clouds gathered over the town. Deep within the attic, a child's laughter echoed from the shadows. It was not the laughter of an innocent boy. It was the laughter of someone who had waited decades for revenge. By midnight, another name on Daniel's list was dead. The entire town was drowning in fear as rumors spread faster than the storm sweeping across the countryside. People locked their doors, closed their curtains, and refused to leave their homes after sunset. Yet no lock could stop what was coming. Emily sat at her kitchen table, studying the journal, when the lights suddenly flickered. A cold wind swept through the room even though every window was closed. The pages turned once more and revealed a hidden entry she had never seen before. In it, Daniel described how he had overheard several powerful men discussing money hidden beneath the farmhouse. When the curious boy discovered their secret, they lured him into the attic and locked him inside. They believed fear and starvation would keep their secret buried forever. Instead, Daniel died alone in darkness while the men continued their lives as respected members of the community. Emily felt sick as she read the final lines. Daniel had spent his last days scratching messages into the attic floor, begging for help that never came. The realization filled her with anger, but another horrifying truth soon became clear. The remaining names on the list were still alive, and Daniel was hunting them one by one. Determined to prevent further deaths, Emily drove through the storm to warn the last surviving member of the group, retired Judge Walter Briggs. Rain hammered against her windshield as lightning illuminated the empty road ahead. Daniel's smile was not the smile of a lost child. It was the smile of a monster born from 40 years of hatred. As Emily stared at the pale figure clinging to the ceiling, every light inside Walter Briggs' mansion exploded at once, showering the hallway with sparks and broken glass. Darkness swallowed the room, except for brief flashes of lightning shining through distant windows. Walter collapsed to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably as Daniel slowly crawled across the ceiling above him. The ghost's hollow eyes remained fixed on the elderly judge, who finally confessed what had happened all those years ago. Between desperate cries, Walter admitted that he and the others had discovered a fortune hidden beneath the farmhouse. When young Daniel accidentally overheard their plans to steal the money, they panicked. Afraid the boy would expose them, they locked him inside the attic, intending to release him after a few days. But a violent storm damaged the farmhouse, and fear of being caught caused them to abandon him completely. Days later, when they finally returned, Daniel was already dead. Instead of reporting the truth, they hid the evidence and invented the story of a mysterious disappearance. As Walter finished his confession, Daniel descended from the ceiling and stood silently in front of him. The room grew colder than ice. Then the ghost whispered a single sentence that made Emily's heart stop. "You left me alone!" Walter begged for mercy. Tears streamed down his face as he apologized again and again, but Daniel's expression never changed. Suddenly, every mirror in the mansion reflected the same horrifying image. A small boy trapped inside a dark attic, desperately scratching at a locked door while screaming for help. Emily watched in horror as the visions replayed Daniel's final days. She could hear his cries echoing through the house. She could feel his terror, loneliness, and betrayal. Yet something else lurked beneath those emotions now. The innocent child who had died decades earlier was almost gone. In his place remained a spirit consumed entirely by vengeance. As Daniel stepped closer to Walter, black shadows began pouring from the walls and ceiling like living smoke. The mansion trembled violently. Outside, trees bent under unnatural winds. Emily realized that each act of revenge was making the ghost stronger. If Daniel killed Walter, nothing would remain to anchor his rage. He would become something far worse than a ghost. He would become a curse upon the entire town. But before she could intervene, Daniel raised his hand toward Walter, and the shadows rushed forward like hungry predators. The moment Daniel attacked, the entire town lost power. From one end of the valley to the other, darkness spread like a living plague. Emily managed to pull Walter away just before the shadows consumed him, and together they escaped the collapsing mansion. Behind them, windows shattered outward as supernatural energy erupted from the building. The ghost's scream echoed across miles of countryside. It was no longer the voice of a child. It sounded ancient, furious, and impossibly powerful. As they fled through the storm, Walter revealed one final secret he had hidden for decades. After Daniel's death, the men had buried his remains beneath the farmhouse instead of reporting the crime. They believed hiding the body would erase the evidence forever. Instead, the unmarked grave trapped Daniel's spirit between worlds. Every year his anger grew stronger until it eventually infected the attic where he died. Emily suddenly understood why the ghost had contacted her. Daniel did not simply want revenge. Deep inside the monster he had become, a small part of him still wanted the truth to be known. That tiny fragment of humanity was the only hope left. If his remains could be found and given a proper burial before the final act of vengeance was completed, his spirit might finally be released. Determined to stop the nightmare, Emily returned to the farmhouse before sunrise. The storm had transformed the property into a scene from hell. Dead trees twisted violently in unnatural winds, while dark clouds swirled directly above the attic. Guided by clues hidden within Daniel's journal, she began digging beneath the floorboards of an abandoned storage shed behind the house. Hours passed. Rain soaked her clothes. Her hands bled from exhaustion. Then her shovel struck something solid. Emily uncovered a small skeleton wrapped in fragments of decayed clothing. Beside the remains lay a rusted metal pendant engraved with the name Daniel Harper. Tears filled her eyes as she realized she had finally found the lost boy. But at that exact moment, the sky turned black. Every bird within sight fell silent. A chilling voice echoed across the farm. "It's too late." Emily slowly looked toward the attic window. Daniel stood there watching her. His eyes glowed with supernatural darkness, and massive shadow-like wings stretched behind him. The ghost had transformed into something far more terrifying than before. The final confrontation had begun. The sky split apart with a deafening crack of thunder as Daniel launched himself from the attic window. His monstrous form descended through the storm like a creature born from pure hatred. Massive wings of living shadows spread across the farmhouse, blocking the moonlight and plunging the property into darkness. Emily stood frozen beside the uncovered remains, clutching Daniel's rusted pendant while cold rain poured from the heavens. The ground trembled beneath her feet as the ghost landed only a few yards away. His once human face twisted between two identities: the innocent boy who had died alone and the vengeful spirit that had spent 40 years feeding on rage. Black mist poured from his eyes and mouth as he stared at the skeleton lying in the mud. For a brief moment, sadness flickered across his face. Then the sadness vanished beneath overwhelming fury. Daniel pointed toward the town in the distance. Through flashes of lightning, Emily could see dark clouds spreading outward from the farmhouse, swallowing homes, roads, and fields. The curse was expanding. If Daniel completed his revenge, every innocent person in the valley would suffer for crimes they never committed. Emily stepped forward despite her fear and held up the pendant. She begged Daniel to remember who he truly was. She reminded him that he had once been a child who wanted to go home, not a monster who wanted to destroy everything. But the ghost only screamed. The sound shattered windows across the farm and sent shockwaves through the storm. Hatred had controlled him for too long. Redemption was slipping away. As Daniel advanced, horrifying visions flooded the air around them. Emily saw his final days trapped in the attic. She saw him crying for help as darkness surrounded him. She saw him scratching bloody messages into the floor while desperately hoping someone would save him. Most terrifying of all, she felt his loneliness. 40 years of pain crashed into her mind at once. The emotional weight nearly brought her to her knees. Daniel roared as shadows erupted from the earth, forming twisted figures that surrounded the farmhouse. They were the spirits of fear, anger, and suffering he had created through decades of vengeance. The storm intensified until it seemed the entire world was collapsing. Yet through the chaos, Emily noticed something important. Whenever Daniel looked at his remains or the pendant, the darkness surrounding him weakened. The child he once was still existed somewhere deep inside the monster. Realizing this might be her only chance, Emily carried the skeleton toward the farmhouse and prepared to give Daniel the burial he had been denied. Behind her, the ghost unleashed a furious scream, and the shadows rushed forward to stop her. The battle between revenge and redemption had begun. At exactly 3:13 a.m., the same time the scratching had first begun, Emily entered the attic one final time. The room was alive with supernatural energy. Furniture floated above the floor. The walls pulsed as though the house itself possessed a heartbeat. Outside, the storm raged with apocalyptic fury. Emily placed Daniel's remains in the center of the attic and set the rusted pendant upon his chest. Instantly, the temperature dropped. Daniel appeared before her in his monstrous form, filling the room with darkness. His glowing eyes burned with hatred as shadow wings spread from wall to wall. The farmhouse groaned beneath the pressure of his power. Yet Emily refused to run. She looked directly at the ghost and began reading the final pages of his journal aloud. She read his hopes, his fears, and his desperate pleas for help. She read the words of a frightened little boy who had simply wanted to see his family again. As each sentence echoed through the attic, cracks of light began appearing across Daniel's shadow-covered body. The monster staggered backward. Memories long buried beneath decades of vengeance started returning. The darkness fought to hold him, but the truth was stronger. For the first time in 40 years, Daniel remembered who he had been before hatred consumed him. Daniel collapsed to his knees. The shadow wings shattered into thousands of black fragments that dissolved into the air. The terrifying creature disappeared, revealing the spirit of a frightened 10-year-old boy. Tears filled his eyes as he looked at Emily, and then at his own remains. The anger that had fueled his existence for decades finally gave way to sorrow. He whispered that he had been so lonely. He admitted that revenge had seemed like the only thing keeping him alive. Emily gently told him that he no longer needed revenge, because the truth was finally known. The people responsible had confessed, his remains had been found, and his story would never be forgotten again. For several moments, silence filled the attic. Then Daniel smiled. Not the horrifying smile of a monster, but the innocent smile of a child finally finding peace. Golden light began surrounding his spirit. The storm outside weakened. The shadows vanished. One by one, the supernatural scars covering the farmhouse disappeared. Daniel thanked Emily for giving him what nobody else ever had, a chance to be heard. As dawn broke over the horizon, his spirit slowly dissolved into the light and vanished forever. The curse was over. The ghost in the attic had finally found peace, and the revenge he sought had transformed into something far more powerful: redemption. The farmhouse stood silent as sunlight streamed through the windows, ending a nightmare that had lasted 40 years.